And hello, everybody. Welcome to our previously recorded workshop on building microservices with Spring Data, Cassandra, and Stargate.io. I am David Jones-Gelordi, one of the developer advocates here at DataStax, joined by Cedric Bloemvan. Hello, Cedric.
Hello, David. Hello, you watching the video. So yesterday it's a recorded episode. Hope you will enjoy. We will keep all the energy and you will do a bunch of hands-on with us.
Yes, we're going to definitely do it together. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and just get into some of the content here today. So the first thing we want to point out are just some of the tools and things that we are going to use as we go through the workshop and the hands-on material today. So for one, you can watch the lessons. As a matter of fact, you're watching one right now up on our YouTube channel. So you're probably watching it there right now, I'd assume. But you'll find as well up on the YouTube channel, the DataStax Devs channel, we have all sorts of other videos and workshops and everything for you to go through. Now, if you take a look down there at the bottom of that slide, you'll see a set of tools, right? We'll start with GitHub. So we will use a GitHub repo today. So all of the workshop materials, contents, and everything are in the repo, right? So the slides that Cedric is going to go through, the hands-on exercises, everything is there. Then next is Astra DB. So in order to power our Spring microservice Java-based app, we need a data layer, right? So that's where Astra DB comes into play. So Astra DB, along with Stargate, we'll talk more about what those are as we go through the materials. That is where you're going to create your database to then hook your app up to. And everything we do, by the way, today is all going to be free. There's no need to, have a credit card or anything like that. And then finally, the last piece there is Gitpod. So if you're not familiar with Gitpod, it is a cloud-based online IDE. It is also free. It is offered by GitHub. So what's really cool is we have this integration there where right out of the GitHub repo, we can then just launch the development environment with all the prerequisites, all the libraries, dependencies, and everything downloaded and ready to go. So those are the three main pieces that we're going to use today. Now, something else kind of exciting for those of you who are going to do this, do the exercises, is you can earn yourself a really cool badge, right? And how do you do that? Well, for one, you watch us right now, right? And then you go through the actual workshop exercises itself, and you'll find that there is a specific homework section in the repo, right? And if you just follow the steps right there, it'll show you how to submit and do all of that. And then once you complete that, we'll actually get notified. We'll go through, we'll review it. Once we approve, you earn yourself a badge. Now, what's really cool about this is you can take this badge and you can put it on your LinkedIn page, like in the features section, or you can share it around and, kind of gives you bragging rights. I think, Cedric, what do we have? At least a dozen badges now? I think we have a bunch from different workshops.
Have 13 badges now. So
okay.
Maybe this one
13.
would be your first, but there is way to go to have your full collection of badges. Brag yourself.
Yeah, we've definitely seen some folks on LinkedIn who are getting them all and like to talk about getting them all. So yeah, so it's cool, but it's really there just kind of an acknowledgement you've done the work, right? You've gone through this, and hopefully from that you've learned something. Okay, so then... Oh, yeah, go ahead, Cedric.
If you do have any question, here is the previous slide. You see the link of the Discord with the QR code.
Yes.
So go for it. We will be there to answer your question. The Full Advocate is almost 24/7. We are all across the world. So yeah, drop your question there, and we were happy to answer them there.
Yeah, good point, Cedric. I totally forgot to mention Discord, so I'm glad that you mentioned something there. Yeah. All right, with that, so looking at the agenda today and the topics we're going to cover, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce more about Cassandra, right? Talk about Cassandra. And why is that? Well, Astra DB is built on Apache Cassandra, and it's important to know what makes Cassandra so cool. Why is it used by so many of the big players out in the industry and some of the disruptive players today, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then what Astra is and how that comes together. Then we'll move more, and actually Cedric is really going to be taking you through the whole conversation on Spring, Spring Boot, Spring Data, and so on and so forth. Then we'll move over to Stargate. So Stargate's really cool. Stargate pairs very well with Astra. You can also use it with open source Apache Cassandra, or really any of the versions of Cassandra that I know of. And it applies a nice kind of API gateway where it allows you to use ubiquitous APIs, things like REST API, a document API for JSON documents, GraphQL, gRPCs in beta, so on and so forth. And you can just bolt that right on top of your Cassandra, right? And Astra comes with it. So we're going to explore that today. And so is the app, right? You're going to see where the app comes into play. And then the last part there is the SDK. The software development kit that, who developed that one, Cedric? I wonder where that came from.
I don't know. That's probably a very good developer because it's working like a job.
Yeah, so we will
Now
explore
you
a little bit.
Who is, right?
Yeah, I wonder
Well,
who could that be? Yeah, who could that be?
Yeah. So I will get you through that. Just to build cool apps.
Yes. So then that'll be the tail end, and after all of this, you will have gotten a chance to play around not only with the app but with the APIs and kind of see how they work.
Okay, so let's do this. So hey, welcome to the Stargate command. So we will use a tool called Stargate. So let's reuse the full Stargate theme, the TV show. So the mission, your mission today, is to find the coordinates of planet Chulak in the galaxy Milky Way, our own old galaxy, to save Tilk, which is Jaffa, from the Goa'uld Apophis. So Astra and the network of Stargates will help you there.
So
and on that,
you can tell who the Stargate nerd here is.
You can't say that. Okay, so let me take over the screen, and you know
yes,
what?
Let's do it.
Make you exciting because I will, start the application in front of you, and hope you will have fun. So as you can see, I do have my IDE here open. It's a Eclipse STS. It's a Java application using Spring Boot and Spring Data. We will explain all that over the coming videos. But hey, it's there. I just started the video, and here, this is what the demo look like. So I will pick the planet Chulak, loading the coordinates in my Stargate, dial the destination using the chevrons.
So epic
Here
sounding.
we go. The vortex is open.
Who wants to step through? Anyone want to step through?
And here we go. I'm not sure that you are listening to the music right now, but as soon as you play the video, it will be so cool. So let's get starting. So what I would like to do now is to start with lesson 1, introducing Cassandra and Astra DB. So before even starting the application, we need a database. So that database for today will be Apache Cassandra, created by Facebook more than 10 years ago. It's a NoSQL distributed database. So you can install on a single machine, single node, and have about 2 to 4 terabytes of capacity. So depending to your use case, and a lot of transactions per second and per core, multiple thousands. It's a distributed database, so you want multiple nodes. In this configuration, there is no master. This is what we call masterless. All communications are peer-to-peer, and it's called gossiping. You can then group those nodes as data center, also called rings. Pretty cool, right? So what do we want to do with those rings? Well, the first key capability of Cassandra is the linear scalability. If you need more capacity or more throughput, you simply add new nodes. So what is important to see here is really the trend. You really add more power just adding nodes. How much can you add, do you think? Well, this is some reference that we do have from Apple and Netflix. For Apple, so 160,000 nodes, 100 petabytes of data online. And for Netflix, 98% of the streaming data is stored on Cassandra, a wide range of use cases, a lot of clusters, and again, petabytes of data store and millions of operations per second. So it can scale a lot. So the data is distributed in the cluster, and among the nodes in the cluster. Each node is in charge of a subpart of your table, and you will split the data using some hashing system, and each node is in charge of a token range. So the data is there, it's replicated. It's replicated X time. X is the replication factor. So as soon as I write the data in Cassandra, it will be replicated here 3 times. And with that, the data is distributed, the data is replicated, there is no master. Hey, you can lose now any of the node and it's not a big deal. With Cassandra, you can have one ring in a cluster, but also multiple rings. So you can install a ring wherever you like in multiple regions, start reading and writing from everywhere, and that's Cassandra's job to replicate the data for you. Pretty cool, huh? Single data layer available everywhere, super fast because the data is close to your customer. What is true for the geographical distribution can also be made with multiple cloud. You can easily install a ring on a cloud provider and make those rings part of the same cluster. It's not magic. You still have to open the port, do some VPC peering to enable the inter-cloud communications, but still, that's totally doable. Pretty cool. So that brings us to the use case of Cassandra. If you cross somebody in the street, say, hey, Cassandra, NoSQL distributed database, you can use that to do event streaming, Internet of Things, log analytics. Why? Because those use cases really need some heavy read or heavy writes, and it will leverage on the scalability part. If you want to leverage on the availability, you will have no data loss. The database will be always on. And to be honest, everybody would be happy to have a database that would not stop, right? It's distributed like previous slides. So global present, probably why the web giant like Uber, Netflix, or Apple are using it. But also having some rings wherever you like could be good for the compliance. You know, GDPR, you need your data to be in your country. Here you go. You can have a dedicated key space only located in your country and let the data flows everywhere for not sensitive data, and everything in the single Cassandra cluster. So all the regular, all the industry that needs the regulation, banking, retails, insurance as well. It's cloud native, and you will see in a minute that Cassandra is running very well in the cloud. So Cassandra is running very well on the containers. And at DataStax, we put a lot of effort to make it smooth to work in Kubernetes as well. And it's the same logic. In Cassandra, you want to add node, it scale out, and so does Kubernetes. So enough of theory. You will start using Cassandra very, very soon, but you don't have to install it. We do have Astra DB for you today. It's a Cassandra as a service in the cloud made by DataStax, and you will have the database running. And not only that, also some APIs, and we will come back to those APIs later. Because now it's time for our first assignment. So let's go to GitHub, look at the QR code, scan, read the instruction over here, do the exercises, and come back with us for the walkthrough.
All right, so this is the GitHub repo that you can see in the top. You should, once you scan that QR code, it'll bring you over to DataStax, our DataStax devs GitHub, and the workshop Spring Stargate. That's where you want to go. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to work through the repo along with you, right? And at any point, don't forget, if you need a moment or something, just pause the video, or you can go back, you can reread a section or something like that. As far as going through the repo, I'm not going to be reading all of the instructions or whatever. That's really more for you to go through. We put a lot of kind of supplementary information in and such, but I am going to be going through the steps and stepping through those, hopefully at a pace that you'll be able to follow. But like I said, at any point, just pause and catch up if you need to. Okay, so the first thing we'd like to do, you already saw the demo from Cedric, so you should have an idea of what that is going to look like. Now, just to point something out is, yes, that's just kind of a funny front end that we put on just to make it work along with the Stargate TV show theme and all that. But there's a lot more going on under the hood, right? So it's a very simple UI and everything, but under the hood, you know, we've got, and you're going to experience this today, there's examples of using the REST API, of using the GraphQL API, of using the document API, like all sorts of stuff, using the database directly with CQL. So we're going to work through all of that. I just wanted to kind of point that out, that from the UI standpoint, it's actually quite simple, but underneath the hood, there's more going on. All right, so as I mentioned before, all of the materials, so if you're interested in like the slide deck that Cedric is going through, that is here. Our Discord chat is there as well if you missed the QR code earlier. So if you want to be able to reach out to us at any time, do it by all means. As Cedric mentioned, we have a whole team of us. We're across the world. We tend to, we at least have somebody in at some point. Come reach out, right? So if you need any help whatsoever, come reach out. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. Let's go to step 1, create DB Astra instance, right? We want to go to that first step. And we are then going to, if you notice in step 1A here, there is a link to astra.datastax.com. So I'm going to go ahead now. By the way, something I want to point out, anytime I'm clicking on a link or opening something, I just middle clicked, but Markdown doesn't allow target blank. So in order to go to another tab, you could either right click, say open link a new tab, or middle click, or control click, or command click. It all depends on the OS you're in, right? But just make sure to be putting stuff into its own tab. It'll make your life a lot easier for sure. Now, once you do that, the first thing you'll be presented with is a page that looks something like this. This is the registration step, right? So if you've never registered before, if you don't have an Astra account, you can sign up with GitHub or Google, or you can put in your own credentials if you'd like. That's totally up to you. So go ahead and do that. Now, I already have an account. I will sign in. Now, by the way, this is completely free. Everything we're going to do here is free. Registration is free. We're going to use free tier with the database. So you should, at no point, you don't have to worry about paying anything. All right, so while you're all signing up, I'm going to go ahead and log in. And again, if you need to, it might just take a moment for you to go through the sign up. It's going to ask you a set of questions. We ask that you fill these out. It's not very long. You can skip it if you want, right? And now I'm actually going to skip them, even though I just asked you to do them, mainly because I don't want to seed the data with, fake stuff. But again, it's just a couple questions in here, but you can skip all of them. It is to help us understand better where you're coming from, because those types of things then have a lot of impact on what we do with Astra moving forward, right? So again, we definitely encourage you to answer those. Now, once you've registered and then you've signed in, you should come to a page that looks similar to this, right? This is going to be the main dashboard. Now, I have a set of databases. Yours will probably be blank, but you should notice the plan is free, right? There is a free plan that is where you start. So again, you won't have to worry about getting any charge or anything like that. Now, on this page, what I want you to do, and this is, by the way, in the instructions, right? This is in the instructions as I'm going through them, but I'm going to just lead you through what to do. So what I'd like you to do, you see this create database button? Go ahead, and there's probably another one over here. Just click on that, and you'll be brought to a page that looks like this. It says create a database. Now, you can technically put whatever values you want here. However, for this workshop, and to ensure that you get on a happy path and everything works for you, we ask that you use the values we've provided here. So for the database name, I want to use workshops. And for the key space name, I want to use Stargate. Now, some of you might be asking, if you're new to Cassandra, what's a key space, right? Especially if you're coming from the relational database world, a key space is just the container of tables, right? It might be equivalent to like a database or a schema from the relational world, right? So it's just how Cassandra calls the container of tables. So all the tables that we're going to create today for our Stargate app, they'll be in the Stargate key space. That's pretty much what that means from that standpoint. Now, again, I mentioned a moment ago how you can use whatever values, and why we're asking you to use these values is because later on, as we start to work with the app's been configured to use the Stargate key space and so on and so forth. So again, just please use these values for now. Then you'll notice here at the bottom, you have a set of cloud providers, right? So what's really cool, one of the things about Astra is that you can choose any of the major 3 cloud providers. You could choose Google Cloud, Amazon, or Azure. I'm going to take AWS today. And then as far as the regions, just pick one close to you, right? So I'm in North America. I'm on the East Coast. So I will take the Virginia one over here. once you've filled out the details, your database name and your key space name, and you've selected a provider and region, you'll notice you get this Create Database button that lights up, and you can go ahead and click that. Now, while that's going, one thing I want to point out about those regions, you might ask, why do you have different providers? Partially, it is in fact for flexibility. You have flexibility on what provider you want to choose. And not only that, Astra takes care of all that for you. You don't need a login for a provider. You don't need to have an account with them or do anything. Astra is totally handling that for you behind the scenes. And even one of the newer features that's actually been released into Astra is the ability for multi-regions. So within a provider, you could actually have, as Cedric was talking about, how Cassandra can span multiple data centers across the region or for different regions. Astra also has that capability. It's not there in the free tier, but it is something that you can do. Okay.
Yes. Also,
go ahead, Cedric.
We asked you to create the data center close to you, and the reason is just to reduce the latency between your application and the database, just to be as fast as possible. Also, multiple cloud providers offer. You probably already using a cloud provider, so having that, you can enable all kind of VPC peering between you and the database to do more advanced stuff.
Right. We're not doing that stuff today, but that capability is in fact there. Okay, so once you've hit the Create Database button, you'll be brought back to your dashboard, and you should see something like this. Here's our new database. And if you look over on the right-hand side, you see it's in pending. Now, your database may be in pending or initializing at this point. It takes a couple minutes to start it up. Right now, you're actually starting up a full-fledged 3-node Cassandra cluster, right? So it does take a couple minutes to do. That's totally fine. If you're pending up, mine just popped to active, as you see right there. And that's fine. If it's pending or initializing, that's all right. We can just move forward a little bit. And by the way, you'll find out throughout the repo, we have these nice little animated GIFs and stuff that'll kind of show you what to do as well if you need. But we are kind of doing a video of that right now. So you're probably good with watching the video. All right, so once our database is active, and mine did go active here just a moment ago, what we want to do now is click on the name of the database. Whether you do that here, or if you do that in the menu to the left, totally up to you, it's going to the same place. It's going to bring you to the database details page. At the very top of that, you'll see these tabs here, and one in particular called CQL Console. Let's click that. By the way, if you're not familiar with CQL, it's actually a subset of SQL if you're coming from the relational world. So if you're used to working with relational databases and used to using the SQL language, CQL is Cassandra query language. It looks and feels just like SQL, right? So again, if you're coming from the relational world, this should feel like home from that standpoint. And this is one of the ways that you can use to interact with your database. All right, so I'm going to scroll down now to step 2B. So just a couple initial commands that we have that we're starting with. First thing I want to do is I want to find out what key spaces I have. So I'm going to describe them. And by the way, you notice I have a little copy widget here. You can just cut and paste this right over into your CQL console. Notice I have my Stargate key space. Now there's a bunch of other key spaces that are there, some system key spaces. We don't need to worry about those. Those are things that the system is just using to provide the service. But the one I care about is Stargate, the one we created a moment ago. Now, the next command here, this use Stargate, what is this about? So I'm essentially telling Cassandra, hey, instead of being in the context where I see all the key spaces, I want to issue a CQL command, and I want to do that in the context of the Stargate key space. So I just say use Stargate. Notice that my prompt now changes to Stargate, so I'm now set up to work within the Stargate key space. Now, before I create any tables or anything, real quick, I just want to say, just describe tables. Notice it's totally empty, right? We created the key space. I don't have anything in here yet. So let's go ahead and create a table. So now moving on to step 2C, create entities. I'm going to create a table here. Now, again, if you're coming from the relational world, this should look pretty darn familiar. You'll notice I have a create table command. I'm saying create table if it doesn't exist. I'm fully qualifying it. So saying here is the key space dot the table name. So chevrons is the name of the table. I have a set of fields, columns, right? And each of those are going to have a type. So area is a text, code is int, so on and so forth. By the way, if you are in fact coming from the relational world, you're probably used to a varchar. In Cassandra, you can use either varchar or text. Matter of fact, I believe that varchar is alias to text anyway. It's the same. But the one thing you might notice is that you don't have to have a constraint on the number of bytes. You don't need to do that in Cassandra. It is technically unbounded. So that's just something you don't need to worry about. And then after I've set my fields, I'm going to have, a primary key, right? So that's kind of how I'm going to key my data. And then I'm going to set some ordering. So if you just copy that and paste it into our CQL console, right? That's it. I just paste it in. Boom, it creates the table. Now, as step 2D, I want to insert some data. So if you remember, this is an app based off the Stargate TV show, right? So Cedric has actually done a lot of fun work here and actually brought in the real chevrons from the TV. These are the actual chevrons from the show, so it's kind of fun if you like to geek out on that. But we're just going to insert those.
You can even go to the you can even go to the wiki and just check that this is actually the real chevrons and the real coordinates for each planet.
Yeah, so if you want to geek out a little bit, totally have fun with that. So if you take a look at the commands here, these insert into commands. So now we're putting some data in the table. Again, if you're coming from the relational world, this should look identical to the way that you do it in SQL. So I'm going to specify my table. I'm going to specify which fields I want to put data in. I'm going to then give values, and then here are the actual values, right? So now we've inserted a bunch of values into the table. And then finally, moving on to step 2E, I just want to validate that I have data in my table. So I've got 39 rows here with my select count from Stargate.chevrons. And then if I wanted to say select something, find specifically the chevrons for the Milky Way galaxy, then I can perform the query here. And okay, good. So I'm just validating that I've got my table, I've inserted data, I can now retrieve that data with the select statement, and I see it in front of me. Awesome. Okay, so that's just the start though, right? That's the start for the chevrons. Now we need to load a lot more data. So instead of using a bunch of insert statements, right, there's another feature here where you can download a CSV and you can then load that asynchronously into Astra. I think it's as long as it's within like 40 megabytes, right? So it's for smaller data sets, but it's a nice little tool that's right there in Astra, so you don't have to use anything external to do it. So what we want to do, going to step 3A now, is again, I'm going to right click on this button, this big download dataset button, right? And I want to say save link as. Now, depending on the OS you're in, you may have to specify .csv, right? Make sure you do that. Again, in Mac, I've got to do that. But just to ensure that you, in fact, have the right file. So it should be destinations.csv. That's important from that standpoint. Now, once you download this file, you can say I have it down here in the lower left. I want to go back to Astra. And up in the top right-hand corner, you have load data. Go ahead and click that. And this will bring us to the data loader screen. So simply enough, I'm going to say option 1, I'm going to upload my own data set, right? So if I go ahead and click on that, you'll see it brings up the dialog here. I can choose the file that I just downloaded, destinations.csv, say open. And once it gets that file, it uploaded successfully, I'll get a next button light up. Once I've done that, I can hit next. Now, a couple things that are going on here in this screen. Number 1, you'll see the table name is destinations. Where did it get that from? It got it from the file name. Something important here, right? For the application, the table name should in fact be destinations. We want to ensure that that is in fact destinations. If, let's say for some reason, you downloaded the file more than once, a lot of file systems will kind of tag a 1 on to it or something like that. And then the file name will be destinations1.csv. And then it's automatically going to pull that up into here, right? So just make sure that it's in fact destinations. Then it's going to give you a sample of the data, right? It's going to show you a sample of the data, maybe what columns you have in the data, what the data looks like. It's not going to be the whole set, obviously. That would be a little absurd if it's a bigger data set, but at least it's a way that you can just validate that you're getting what you expect. At the very bottom here, under the keys and clustering section, we do in fact want to set a partition key and a clustering column. Now, if I scroll down a little bit in the instructions, you will see that it specifies, it does tell you which ones to use. I'm going to do that now as well. In our case today, for the partition key, we do want to partition by galaxy. Imagine there are a lot of galaxies in the universe, many billions of them. So we're not storing all of the data into a single partition. We are going to partition by galaxy. And you'll see here in the sample, these are all Milky Way. But if we had more data or something, then we would be storing other galaxy data in other partitions and such. We also want to order a little bit, right? We want some ordering in our data based off of the name. I selected partition key by accident. Don't do what I just did. Select the clustering column piece. Let me scroll down here. Where did it go? I can't. There we go. I've got things zoomed in funny, and I kind of got stuck there. Yeah. So so the clustering column. So what this will do in Cassandra, if you choose something like an alphabetical type, something that can be alphabetized or whatever, and if you put it in the clustering column, it'll automatically order on it. So when I select my data out later by my galaxy, all of the responses that I get will automatically be ordered, right? It does that naturally. So it actually, in Cassandra, that's kind of a cool optimization. It pays the cost of the ordering on the write, which is fast, where later on in the read, I don't have to order then. I get the data already out in that ordered format. Okay, so once I've chosen my partition key, and in this case, our clustering column, so galaxy and name, I'll get my blue button to light up. Let's say next. Last thing is we want to then ensure that we're injecting this data into the correct database and key space. Now, we started with the workshops database. It knows that, so it did that for me. The key space, though, you should probably only have one, most likely, is Stargate. We want Stargate in this case. And that is exactly what we're talking about here in step 3E. Again, once I've chosen both a database and a key space, I will get my next button that'll light up. Go ahead and click that. Now, what's going to happen is Astra is going to load this asynchronously in the background, right? So it says, hey, your data is being imported. You're going to get some kind of notification. So you get an email, right? So once the process starts, you'll get an email that the process is started. You'll also get another email when it's complete, right? So now for this next part, we do actually need to have some data. So yeah, and these are examples right here of both of the types of messages you'll get when it starts and then when it completes. This should only take a minute. And then once that is there, we will go to our CQL console. We're going to go back to our CQL console, and then we'll validate that the data is there. All right, so now I've gotten my emails. I see that the data set has been loaded. So I'm going to go to my CQL console here at the top, and let's validate that we have the data that we expect. So I'm going to pull the query that you see, this select star from Stargate destinations. I just want to validate. I have data. Wonderful.
Woo-hoo!
Right? So we know that our data load worked, and I have more data populated from our Milky Way galaxy. Okay. All right. By the way, I want to point out, I'm not going to do it right now, but there is a special question for you. If you want to try to do something a little bit more advanced, I'm not going to open the solution. I encourage you to do it on your own. And then if you want to check your work, click to view the solution. All right, so last thing in this section here is going to be to create our Astra token. So great, we have a database, we have a table, right? We created a key space, we created a table, we inserted some data in the table, we validated we have it, but now we need to create a method to authenticate to our database for our application to use, right? So I want to go to step 4, create Astra token, right? Now you're going to notice I'm going to use different tabs for a lot of this, right? So I do like to open things in different tabs because we're going to use this a little bit later. So I'm going to open up another tab in my dashboard here. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. The instructions will actually bring you through going to your current organization on the top left. You can click on organization settings, and in there, there's a token selection. Also in your dashboard, on the very right, you'll see this ellipsis. If you click that, you can just say generate a token. Right. So that's a kind of a quicker way to get there. Now, you'll notice in the instructions it says pick the role database administrator. We're just opening it up. Let's just give it everything. No, really, though, when it comes to the app is using a back-end DevOps API that's going to has some really nice features for us. And that part of that requires the administrator role. But once you choose that, you'll get generate a token, click the button, and boom, You're going to get all of your credentials. Now, something to point out here. For security reasons, if you then navigate away from this page, you will not get these again. You'll have to generate a new token. Now, the cool thing is you can generate as many tokens as you want. That's fine, right? But I suggest for now, and this is a reason why I opened another tab, just leave this up. I also highly encourage you to download the token details. That way you can reference them later if you need. Just know that, again, if you navigate away from this page, you're not going to get these again. But leave this up. We're going to come back to these pretty soon. All right. All right, with that, I believe, Cedric, we need to go back over to you, don't we? And talk about some stuff before we get into the code.
I think we are done with assignment 1 and we can move to lesson 2. So see you in a minute in lesson 2. All right, so you did everything you need to have the database ready and rolling. Now it's time to code something on top of it. And to code, we will use a framework, Spring. So Spring has been created 16 years ago already. And to be honest, I have used Spring for 14 years. In the beginning, it was called Interface 21. The idea at the very core of Spring is what we call inversion of control. You will define an interface and multiple implementations of the same interface. And this is at runtime that the framework will decide which implementations to pick based on the name, based on some tips you can give to Spring. So the first use case for this inversion of control was mocking, provide some service working and doing some response very, very early in the development, even if the service is not ready yet. But now there are multiple flavors of how to use this inversion of control, especially in between layers of your applications. So the best website to go to learn about Spring, it's spring.io itself. It's pretty cool. It will explain you more in detail what it's Spring, all the different products, because now Spring is huge. Does have a lot of parts: microservice, reactive, cloud, web apps, serverless, event-driven, batch. We did a couple of sessions live presenting cloud reactive microservice. Today we will focus on microservices and a framework called Spring Boot. Microservice and Spring Boot. So Spring Boot is kind of a runtime for your microservice. Instead of deploying some WAR file in an application server, good old WebSphere, BA, WebLogic, and so forth and so on. Yeah, we love them. We miss them
Memories.
so much. So, yeah, instead of that, it will be just a jar, an executable jar, standalone application. And so with that, it's pretty easy to spawn as many as you like because it's just a standalone application. So Spring Boot is the runtime. Under the hood, there is an application server embedded like Tomcat or Undertow, but you don't have to worry about that. That's Spring Boot to handle. So in the Spring Boot app, you have the Spring Magic context. You see in blue here, inversion of control in between your layers. What is cool with Spring Boot, that is provide you some starters. You need some metrics monitoring, add the proper starter to your project. You need to do health check. You need to do special configuration. You need to use a database in particular. Simply add the starter you need. With the starter, it will initialize what we call the Spring context with everything loaded for you. So what do you find in the Spring Boot context or a Spring context in a Spring Boot app? Well, multiple layers. So the persistence layer, also called DAO or repository, will handle all the interaction with the databases. Business layer on top of the persistence layer is there to do some business logic, aggregation, computation, your business rules, and compose some data coming from multiple persistence layers. And finally, you find the presentation layer that could be just a REST controller if you want to do a REST API, or a view controller if you want to do a web page. And guess what? Today, in the Spring Boot app, you will find both because we want to show you as much as we can in the small time we do have. In Spring Boot, you can have a normal stack, the servlet task, as we used to do, servlet API, Spring MVC, and you can also go the reactive route. But as soon as you use something reactive, the full stack should be reactive. Again, today, let's focus on the simple servlet stacks. So again, this is our application. Let's say we do have import what we need for security, monitoring, configuration. Remember, those are starters. We want to use Cassandra as a database. In the Spring world, to interact with data, you will use Spring Data. Spring Data will provide you some dedicated repositories where you only have finally to, in the end, you only have to define your entities and the repository, and all the code requests will be generated for you. You simply have to declare the interface, and all the magic will be done for you. So no surprise, we will use Spring Data Cassandra, and even Spring Boot Data Cassandra Starter. Yeah, it's all composed, it's like the Lego in the names. To expose data, so you will see the data in the web view. Remember my demo? Well, we will use MVC to do that, and to pick some data from the database, and using some JavaScript, sometimes we need to invoke an API. The data is exposed using REST here. All right, so enough me talking. It's now time for you to start building and running this application. Again, you have nothing to install. Go scan the QR code to go to the step 2 if you're not already set up, and come back to watch the walkthrough with David.
Alrighty, so I'll give you just a moment to scan that QR code, as Cedric just said, and good. Okay, let's go on then to this second spot. So where we should really be in this second set of assignments, what we're going to do now is we are going to launch Gitpod. That's going to be our online cloud-based IDE right out of GitHub, right? So it's a really cool piece of functionality. And then we're going to use this to get our app set up. We're going to configure it with the values from our token, and then we're going to launch the app, right? And we're going to see it work. So we should be on step 5, launch Gitpod. Now, again, I want to, you see this open in Gitpod button right here. I want to open that in another tab, right? So I'm going to middle click in my case. Now, here's something really cool. If you've never used Gitpod before, by the way, you do need to be logged into GitHub. If you're not, it will ask you to log in. Here's what's seriously neat about this. Gitpod is now launching essentially VS Code in the cloud. And we have, in this case, we've pre-configured it a little bit to handle pulling in, dependencies and stuff for the app and such. And it's you'll see that once it pulls down the image and it starts building all that, you'll see that go. It's really nice from the standpoint, especially if you want to share workspaces with others or colleagues or whatever. It's a really great way to do that. And from the workshop standpoint, this allows us to ensure that everybody has the same experience, right? If you want to do, by the way, all this stuff locally in your own, you can. That's definitely a more advanced path, though. You kind of have to know what you're doing to set up your IDE and such. Where here, we kind of get to give everybody the same exact experience, right? So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on this as it's building. And you can see it's already building, right? It's already kicking off the process to build the app. And we're going to let that finish. It takes just a moment. Maven doesn't download as much of the world as NPM does, for those of you who are a node.
Oh, true. Oh, you said that. People tend to say Maven download everything. Yeah, you should start trying Node. And
if you haven't done JavaScript and Node and stuff, and you complain about Maven downloading everything, NPM will download the world, the whole world. I'm not kidding. All right, so once this completes, right, you'll see a little prompt like this here. You should, automatically, you should be in the workshop Spring Stargate demo directory. And then at that point, we want to go to step 6, know your Gitpod. So the first thing we want to do here, though, is you see this command, this gpurl 8080. What is this about? So by the way, the first time you go to paste a command in the terminal, it's going to ask you if you allow it. That's what I'm doing there. Since we are running in a cloud-based environment, Gitpod has its own endpoints that it generates, right? It's not just some like random IP open or something and publicly available. So in order for us to get access to those, those endpoints so we can do things, right? You have this GP command. And we're saying, hey, Gitpod URL, give me the URL at port 8080, right? So that's what this is. We're going to use this here in a moment, but that is one way that you can use to get access to, in our case, our application is going to be running on port 8080, so we're going to want to be able to get to that later. All right, so moving then down to 6B. So 6B, I want to build the project and download its dependencies. So again, I'm just going to paste that right here in our terminal. We should see it doing a bunch of build stuff and such and giving us nice messages that all look green. This should only take a moment. Boom. All right. So now our application is ready for us to configure it and start into the launch. So now I'm going to move on to step 7, right? This is the part where we want to then take the credentials that we got when we created our token a moment ago, and we want to put those into our application YAML so our application can use those to then authenticate against the database and start doing things. So this is all spelled out for you here in the instructions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Stargate Demo, Source, Main, Resources, to my application YAML. For those of you Java developers, you're probably used to that kind of structure. But if you're new to it or whatever, like I said, we've actually spelled it out and you can see it in the image as well. So you'll find that the variables that we need to populate are down at the very bottom of the application.yaml. And notice how in each of these cases, you'll see that we have these kind of like placeholders here. So we want to replace those with the data from our database, right? So now another reason why I opened another tab, if I go back over to where we generated our credentials and such before, you'll notice that we have 3 things: client ID, client secret, and token. And if we come back to our application YAML, you should notice we have the same exact thing. So those are going to be one-to-one replacements. I'm just going to click. There's a little copy widget on the right-hand side. Make that easy. So I want my client ID first. I want to replace the whole thing, right? Don't leave those greater than or less than signs in there. Then I'm going to move to my client secret. Replace the whole thing again. Boop. And then get my token. And yes, the token does include this Astra CS : and such. You want the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now we've got the credentials set, but we need to do just a little bit more, right? When we created, if you remember, when we created the database initially, we picked a cloud provider and a region, right? So we need to tell it, hey, which one, right? So now if we go back to our dashboard, so I went back to my normal Astra, my Astra dashboard. I'm going to click on this dashboard here. And you'll go back to where you see your database that you created earlier. Notice the database ID here. I want that ID. I want to click that ID, this one specifically. I'm going to put that here in my database ID field. Then the last thing I need is the region, right? So I'm going to click on the database, go back into my details page, and you'll see this region is right here. In this case, because I chose AWS, right, it's going to be US East 1. You'll notice that the regions will be different depending on the provider you choose. But you just want to copy the value you have there, put that in your cloud region variable, and that's it. Now, the cool thing is this application is configured. It's automatically saving as we're going through. So once you have all of those things filled out, here is the moment of truth, right? So if we go to step 8, run some unit tests, you'll see this first one here. So what this first test is going to do, this EX1, this is actually going to run through a whole set of tests. It's going to test the REST API, the GraphQL API, the document API. It's going to test the DevOps API, all the APIs, right? And you'll see this in the log output. There we go. Yep, you'll start to see that if this is working or not. Now, if this is configured correctly, you should see messages just like what we're seeing, right? Where I'll scroll up a little bit here, where it says, is enabled, so on and so forth, right? So it's confirming for us that our configuration is good. It even went so far to kind of do a simple select, pull out the chevrons, right? We know that we have performed a successful test. We've connected to the database, and we've gotten some data. So wonderful, because honestly, how many of you here building apps, and it's that one of the hardest things is getting the plumbing working, right? So we've just connected it up. Great. We know we're talking to the database. We're ready to move on. By the way, if for some reason you're following along and you get an error here, right? If you see an error with one of the APIs or something, the first thing you want to do is check. Did you miss a character, right? I've actually done that, or maybe I miscopied something, or I fat fingered something. Just check these values. If you do see an error, otherwise, you're good to go. All right, so moving on to step 8B. So this one here, this test, now, by the way, I should point out, and Cedric, you may have more that you want to say about this, is that these tests are really here so we can kind of validate and confirm that things are working as we expect. But as Cedric mentioned, we're using Spring Data Cassandra. If you want to see an example usage, go to the test, right? You can totally take a look at the test and kind of see what's going on from that standpoint.
Not only the test, but the code. You can go and maybe open just one of the repository to see what it looks like. You will see almost no code there. You define simply an object that looks like exactly the table we created together in the first lesson. And boom, that's it. Now Spring Data is able to look at values in the table and do some search and insert and delete right away.
All right, so now you can see in this case that this time, for this test, we're specifically testing using Spring Data, and that our tests are successful. So again, so far so good, right, from that standpoint. So again, these tests are really nice to use as examples and just kind of validate things. And then the last one here, we're just going to go ahead and validate that we have our destinations. Remember, we created our destinations when we loaded, remember we did that data load, we loaded data in the background, right? So we're essentially just testing that all of the pieces that our app need, our chevrons, our destinations, those are all there, those are all working. And yes, we do have a successful test, and we were able to test the destination. So we know that our table's there, it's got data, and so on and so forth. If for some reason you had an error here on the destinations, you might want to check, is your destinations table named destinations, right? Remember when I mentioned on the import, if for some reason like you had like multiple downloads or the file name was different, it's going to imply the table name from that file name. So if that was different than destinations, right? The application's expecting destinations, you might want to check that out, right? So that's exactly why we have these in here, so you can kind of just validate that all of the previous steps were done correctly. All right, finally, let's run the thing, right? This is we're gonna have some fun here. So step 9, run the application. I'm gonna grab the step or the execution from step 9A. I'm gonna paste that in. Now at first, all it's gonna do is it's gonna start up the app and it's gonna run in the background, right? And yay, you'll see it once it runs, but you're not gonna see much anymore. What's going to happen, though, is once the application starts up, it runs at 8080. So Gitpod's going to actually open up 8080. It's going to say, okay, 8080 is ready to go. And matter of fact, once you get to once you see this output right here, you see started Stargate demo application, right? So it is ready to go, and it is started. Now what we want to do in order to, launch this is create a new terminal, right? So we're going to leave the application running in this one. If I go up into the hamburger menu here, up in the top left-hand corner of my Gitpod, I click on that, you'll see terminal and new terminal. We'll click on that. Great. And once we've done that, now remember this GP command we were talking about before. This is saying Gitpod URL 8080, right? So we want to get what URL is exposed there for port 8080. One other thing I actually want to show you real fast for those folks in Gitpod, notice in the lower right-hand corner that any of the ports your application are using will be exposed there. If you click on that, you can actually open up the URLs and stuff this way as well. You could do it both ways, but we're total command line junkies here. Let's just do it this way. All right, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to now put it into a new tab and hit it.
Oh,
oh, we have a running app. Woohoo!
Woo! And you at home enjoy the music.
Right, exactly.
Enjoy
So
the
I'm
ride.
actually, I'm gonna reload that. I want to make sure the music loads here.
Yeah, you need to select Chulak now, you need to save Chilk. So please click Chulak and then the music will start.
There it goes. All right, so we have some music. Oh, and then I'm gonna hit my chevrons.
And you need to do it in time because
I gotta
you
do it
have a
quick.
limited amount of time to select all of them.
So suspenseful. There we go.
Boom.
Oh, the music is just so epic.
Yeah, there are not a lot of workshops where we travel to another planet.
All right, and then
Yeah, cool.
there we go.
Nice.
All right, so now we've gotten to Chulak, and you can see that over on the right-hand side. Now, like I said before, that it looks a little simple, from the standpoint from the UI, but in order to do this, it's actually using the backend APIs and stuff. It's actually talking to the database to pull up the data and get the chevrons and all that, right? So
Yeah,
it's actually
especially
pulling that from the database.
Yeah, indeed, you are doing two calls. So first is really retrieving all the planets inside the galaxy based on the first destinations that you enter. And then for destination, you will find all the chevrons. That's a couple of action direct connected to the backend.
Exactly. So little fun kind of front end that we just threw on to all the stuff that's actually going on in the back end. So hopefully you got to this point where you have the working app. And by the way, as the instructions point out, when you click those chevrons, you got to do it fast. You got to make sure you get them in time or they're going to time out on you. So you can have fun with that. All right. So hopefully you got to that point. Again, if all of your tests ran successfully, you should be good from that standpoint. The app should just run just fine. So go ahead and get to that spot, and then Cedric is going to bring you through some awesome
See you in lesson 3. Hey, hello again. Let's start now lesson number 3, introducing Stargate. The product this time, not the demo. So Stargate is a data gateway on top of the database. A data gateway will introduce some decoupling between the database and the way to interact with the data. So we want the developer to be able to use the APIs they like to interact with the data. So, if you don't have this gateway, as a developer, you need to learn SQL, Cassandra query language. Spring Data can help you, but in the end, you still have to know how and what to do. At the DBA side, people do not like to let you execute the query they like. Sometimes it's relational database. They gave you some store procedure just to exactly limit the kind of request you can do. But with Cassandra, it's not always the case. And if you try to execute something that is not allowed, you'll get some error message from Cassandra. So to cope with that, hey, this is the gateway. So introduce loose coupling in between the persistence extension and the API extensions. So at the persistent extension, no surprise, you will see some multiple distribution of Cassandra, 3x, 4x, release this year, super exciting, great improvement in performance, and the DSC Enterprise 6.x. As APIs, and this is the one you will use in assignment 3, the REST API, the GraphQL APIs, JSON, also called Document API, how to interact with Cassandra as is. It was a document-oriented NoSQL database, even if in the beginning it is a column-oriented database. SQL is still there. And as David stated in the very beginning, gRPC is coming very, very soon. So before, as a developer, you will have include the drivers, Spring Data using the drivers, and the driver connect to the node using SQL. Okay, but the drivers need to be pretty clever. Keep the connection open, do the load balancing, failover, else check. So if one node goes down, the drivers knows and will recover. But again, you still need to know SQL and you need to have those ports open for SQL. Now with Stargate in front of it, you will have the APIs. And by the way, Stargate is a node, is a Cassandra node without any data. Cassandra will join the gossiping and will be aware of the token range as well and be able to route the request exactly to the proper replica. Stargate exposes multiple interfaces, I keep saying that, REST GraphQL, gRPC, SQL, and you can add multiple Stargate if you wish. Now you will have a load balancer in front of the Stargate and load balance your Stargate nodes. And like that, for the first time, you have an easy way to scale only the compute layer. You can only make Stargate scale and not the database. You know, with Astra DB, do not worry, you will have 3 nodes in Cassandra to start with and 3 nodes of Stargate as well. And the load balancing is already done for you at Astra level. This is what you will do in a minute. So the REST API, you have anything you can do with SQL really. So from DDL, working with the schema, and also DML, CRUD, create, read, update, delete at the data level. Notice that you can only query by the primary key, which is the best practice. If you start to do some select in something that is not in the primary key in Cassandra, you will get an error by default. So we want to avoid that and keep the services as fast as possible. The document API is really a way to do schema-less or at least validation-less. You know, a JSON document does have a schema, but very loose schema. So you will see that you can insert any JSON and retrieve the JSON. And the term now is called the namespace, the collections, and the document. But again, you will do that in a minute. Last but not least, you also have GraphQL, which is super cool. GraphQL is getting some traction, creating in 2.16. What you can do with that is having only the endpoint. You can discover all the methods that are available. And when you interact with it, you can shape your request in a way that will only retrieve what you need. Because REST is pretty chatty. Here you can simply retrieve exactly what you need. Super useful for both mobiles and web application when the bandwidth matters, meaning all the time, right? So fortunately, as I told you, Stargate is included into Astra DB. Nothing for you to check or configure. You will simply use embedded tool provided by Astra, namely Swagger UI and GraphQL Playground, to play with those API. And with that, your turn. Go to assignment 3, number 10 and 11 in the GitHub. Here you see the QR code. And of course, David will do the walkthrough with you in the next video.
Assignment 3 now. This time, we're going to use both. We're going to explore both the REST API with Swagger and then the document API, also using REST and Swagger, actually. I just got to say, too, like right off the bat, that the document API standpoint, I recognize for Java developers, you know, I wonder how many folks are actually using document APIs. It's usually more of a JavaScript JSON kind of thing. But I will say, if you don't already have a schema, if you're prototyping an app or something like that, the Doc API is a really neat way to start because you can kind of just get going. And then as you kind of fill out what your schema might look like and stuff, then you can kind of, you know, migrate over to something else. But it's all already there for you with Stargate and Astra and all that. All right, so where we want to go then is step 10, using Stargate REST API. Now, something really, really cool here, if we go back over to our application, is that Swagger has been included in the application as well. Like I said, there's a lot going on under the hood with the app to expose a lot of the capabilities that you have, even though the front end looks like it might be kind of simple. And one of those is this, the Swagger. So if I just copy the value here from step 10a, remember we created a new terminal, right? We want to leave our application up. So our application is still running in the other terminal. And we're going to go ahead and paste this, though, in the new terminal. It's going to go, hey, I'm opening up Swagger. It's going to open it up in this simple browser right here in Gitpod. Now, it does this. Gitpod has this nice simple browser. It's actually pretty cool. I find, though, for Swagger, I like putting it in another tab because we're going to need the screen real estate. So notice what I just did there. up in the very top right-hand corner in the simple browser, you're going to see this little launch open in browser button. That's what I did. So that should bring us to something that looks like this for Swagger. Okay, so what we want to do then is we're going to be in the data, the data section here in the data block. And I want to go down to V2, retrieve all rows, right? V2, retrieve all rows. Then if you notice, it's not going to let you do anything yet. You have to say, try it out, right? Try it out. You want to click on that. It's going to open up these fields. And then this first one here, this X Cassandra token, that's where we need to put in our Astra token, right? It's that one that has Astra CS in the front. I'm going to put this right in here. And if you remember, you need that, right? You need to, every time these are publicly, this is a cloud-based system. These endpoints are publicly available. You need a way to authenticate. You want anybody to just walk into your database, right? So you provide this token in each of our calls to REST. So that's what we're doing here. Now, the rest of the values that you need, the key space name, table name, we give them for you. We give them to you right here. So the key space name is Stargate. Table name is chevrons. I want to leave the page size and stuff blank. I'll just use the defaults. And then if I click on that blue execute button, hopefully, aha, there are our chevrons, right? So if you remember, we inserted these earlier, right? We inserted these, we created the table, we did this with the CQL console, but now I'm able to use the REST interface or the set of REST endpoints that have been created automatically for us with Stargate in Astra. It's just provided for you, right? So you already have these REST endpoints that are already ready for you. One thing I want to also point out here in Swagger, notice that I have this code 200. It was clearly successful. If you scroll down the bottom, you'll see the list of responses that you have. These are just potential responses. These are just the list of what you could get. A 200 is okay, right? So don't get tripped up on these thinking something went wrong. These are just the responses that you can get. What you're looking for is what actually happens. So we got our chevrons. Wonderful. Okay, so now moving on to step 11 here, using the Stargate document API. This time, we're going to go to the document block. So a second ago, we were just experimenting with the data block. And by the way, I'm going to cheat and grab that Astra token because we're going to need it in a moment. So I'm going to collapse my data block, go to the document block, right? And I want to find create a new document. V2, create a new document. So create a new document, V2, that one, right? So again, I'm going to hit my try it out. I'm going to fill out my, apparently I did not copy that properly. That's okay. I've got my token right here. There we go. All right. Fill out again my X Cassandra token. I need to authenticate every time. I'm filling it out with my token. We give you the value of the namespace. Now the namespace is essentially the key space, right? A little bit different nomenclature when dealing with the document API. This time though, we're going to create a collection called sample doc, right? That's what we're doing here. And then notice we have this JSON we have this JSON here. You want to copy that. Completely overwrite what was there. You want just the JSON. So we're going to create a collection called sample doc, and then we're going to use this JSON to create our document. Again, I'm going to click that blue execute button. Hopefully I get a 200. There it goes. Wonderful. And now I have a document ID. So the return you're going to get, anytime you create a new document, you're going to get a document ID back, right? That tells you that you've created that document. Now, something to just kind of, just point out here is that through this REST endpoint, we actually were able to use a document API, and underneath the hood in Stargate, it takes this document, it takes this JSON object and automatically shreds it. And essentially, it does all the parsing and everything for you. And it has created this in a document format in Astra, right? Just with that one step. So it's really quite powerful. And that's what I meant before. Like if you're experimenting, prototyping, this is really kind of a good way when you don't really have your schema all set up yet. You can just create an object like this and just go and use that to kind of work out your application from there. All right, so then what we're going to do now is once you've done that, again, that was just to kind of expose you a little bit to using Swagger with both the document API and REST endpoints. By the way, one other thing I do want to show you we launched Swagger from within the application, right? So you can do that, and that's there. If you go back to Astra and you go to your database, you'll see this Connect tab here. And notice the REST API, right? You'll see this. You have your own Swagger endpoint. You can actually launch that and work directly with Swagger that way as well, right out of your database. It's really cool. All right, so with that, we'll go back over to Cedric to talk about some more things.
Okay, all right. Hope you enjoy these APIs, right? It's easier now to connect to Cassandra. But you know what? There is a lot of API, and I hope somebody just do the work to create the client to wrap all those API. So it's done in something called a software development kit. So Stargate provide the REST API in multiple versions. Document API doing a lot of stuff. GraphQL APIs, even 2 APIs. One SQL first, one schema first to do GraphQL federation, SQL, and even more coming. So that is a lot. And this is the reason why we created at DataStax 3 SDKs, one for Java, one for JavaScript, one for Python. Yet, maybe more to come. And we do have created the client and wrapper to use the APIs. So the API for the Stargate and also APIs in Astra. Because in Astra, there are some DevOps API to create a database from the API, create a new region, create a role, new profile, doing some to create some security links, just to create some privacy between you and the database, secure everything. And so everything is wrapped for you to use with these SDK. Boom. Okay. And in the code, I created a couple of code for you to interact with the SDK. So final assignment for just have a look to the walkthrough SDK number 12. And again, David will do the walkthrough with you.
Alrighty, so again, scan that QR code if you haven't done it, or if you're already following in the repo, you're probably good. So we're going to go back over to our repo. We've experimented a little bit with, the Swagger and the REST endpoint and document API and stuff like that. So we want to go now to step 12, and we're going to do the walkthrough of the SDK, right? So as Cedric has kind of alluded to, the SDK is included as part of the Stargate demo that we've been running. That's obviously what we've been using in the back end to really make it a lot easier to talk to all these APIs and stuff in Java. So what I'd like to do then is go to step 12a using DevOps API with the SDK. We're going to go back over to our Gitpod and to that terminal that we had open from before. All right, so I'm going to copy the commands that are here. I'm going to run another test that's going to test out the SDK, the Java SDK in the background. And there it goes. We should see some wonderful tests. Let me see all
Wonderful
that.
text, wonderful code.
Wonderful tests. Wonderful tests. Woo.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, there are a few things, for my fellow coders out there, there are a few things more satisfying than when you have a full test suite and you run that test suite and you made a bunch of changes and it's all green and it goes by. That's actually quite satisfying. So, all right. So really what we want to see here, right, is when we ran this, we wanted to see that we're using the DevOps API here. Notice the difference here. I'm actually scrolling through. It actually went through the different databases that I have, right? So the DevOps API is actually kind of powerful there. Now, you may only have one database if you just started with this today. I have a bunch. But you see it has this ability to be able to kind of query in the back end of Astra. This could be really useful in a lot of ways.
Yeah, maybe you can open exercise 4, just the source code, just for everyone to see what it look like. So an SRC test Java exercise 4, the one we just run. Look at the code. So the Astra client, the main class has been initialized for us by the starter, looking for all the parameters in application.yaml. And with this object, with this test, what we do is Astra client dot API DevOps databases .search databases, and this is how we got the result. So the SDK has been designed to be a fluent API, and we will see that in the next two tests.
All right, awesome. Yeah, it is really simple. It's really simple to use the SDK. That's kind of the idea, right? All right, so let's move on to step 12b. And so I'm going to run another test, this time the SDK REST API. And while that runs, I'll open that up so we can see an example here. Again, not a ton of code needed. Okay, great. So we see now in this case, right, that it went and pulled the chevrons using the REST API, but via the SDK, right? Like, Cedric, is there anything you want to talk about there as far as this goes?
For this one, yeah, the second class is a raw mapper, and if you already have used a Spring GDBC in the past, that's totally the same logic. You will execute something against the REST API, getting back a list of raw data, and here we will marshal back the result as an object. So now that's pretty cool. You can simply do Astra client.stargate data.keyspace to focus on our keyspace.table, focus on the chevron table, .search, provide a filter, and get the result exactly as you expect as objects.
Awesome. All right, moving on then to the document API. So this is going to be step 12c. Again, all these are using the SDK.
And the very last step for today.
God, we're almost done. I don't know how I feel about this, right? All right, and while that's doing that, I'll bring up the code again for this one. There we go. See, you have a little, just a little error handling in here, just in case you didn't create the document, right? You didn't do that. So you got to make sure, in order for this test to be successful, right? Yeah, you have to go through that previous Swagger step where you create the document and everything. This is another reason why, as well, we ask you in the very beginning to make sure you use the value of the database and key space that we gave. So all these work, and from that standpoint. But you can see here, you can see I've got the document ID. Remember, we just created the one document, and we have that email, clumen@sample.com, right? If we were to go back to
the workshop,
what's that?
Now, wondering who wrote the workshop.
Yeah, who wrote this workshop? I wonder, right? But if you notice in our JSON object, when we created this document earlier, here's the email, right? So you see that matches over what we're getting here. What's really cool about this as well, though, is that, when you store a document here like this via Stargate, whether it's open source Cassandra or whether it's in Astra or something like that, this is automatically, like I said, all being shredded. You get individual access to all the subfields and stuff like that are in here. So you can, again, if you don't have a schema or anything yet and you're working that stuff out, it's nice. You can use the documents to kind of get started. Anything else you want to say about the code in this one, Cedric?
Just looking, but no. I mean, this time you don't need any mapper based on the JSON that will be retrieved using the Jackson framework. The framework will try to get back to the document you ask, because as a parameter, this time you provide a class. And so the mapping will be automatic this way. Also, document API is really, really cool to create what we like. Do not think that much about the schema this time.
Exactly. All right. So hopefully you've been able to follow along with us and you've gotten to this point where you've kind of explored some of these. I would really encourage all of you to take a look at the test, take a look at some of the implementation code, and it'll give you some, it definitely, kind of give you examples of how to use the SDK and everything like that. With that, moving over to the homework section here. So this is the part, if you remember in the very beginning, we talked about the ability to earn a badge. So if you go through and you do this homework, and then you follow the instructions that you see that are right here, right? The last link, that number, step 3, submit your homework here, you click on that. That will actually create a GitHub issue is what it'll do. We've got it all set up for you. You just fill this out, add in some of the screenshots, and then we'll get notified and we'll review it. And once you're good, you'll get your badge, and then you can use that for bragging rights and everything. Right now, what do we have? Like 2,500 badges we've issued or something, Cedric?
Yes, 2,200, I think. 2,200.
Oh, it's 22. Yeah.
When we record this video. But hey, yeah, please also share the love, share this video. We provide some link in the end. Yeah, please share with the hashtag DataStax dev workshops for us to know if you enjoy or not. And always the feedback is also good to be provided on the Discord we link in the beginning.
Absolutely. So with that, just wrapping a couple things up. So again, we just talked about the badge there. So you'll see it at the bottom of the repo. Follow the instructions and we will get it graded and get you your badge. And with that, thank you. Thank you so much for taking some time and spending it with us, going through the awesome, fun Stargate demo.
Yes, again, the feedback is very important for this one. This is one of the first we record with this format, and we would like it to be the best. So your feedback will be super valuable this time. So
absolutely. So thank you, everybody. And we will see you when you submit your homework and get those badges. Everyone, take care. See ya.
Take care.